to share that. I don't know if Tracy has added me in now as a co-host, or if I can just share my screen.
Yeah, I think you should be able to, Lynn. If not,
hang on a wee second, having a few issues there. Hang on a wee second, it doesn't seem to be coming up on my screen.
Okay, let's just
2 seconds to go back and
oh, there we go.
No, that's not the right.
We're seeing your calendar.
Yeah, I've just closed it because it's not sorry, let me just here we are. Let's see. Is that now sharing?
Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint now, yeah.
So, hello everybody. Lynn Laughland, Managing Director of HRM Homecare Ltd. Been in the care sector for 27 years now, and I would say that this year's probably been the most challenging year because of the COVID pandemic. The sector's a highly publicised, highly regulated and very politicised sector, and it has not been easy trying to remain on the sidelines of the public debate on health and social care. So just wanted to tell you a wee bit about the company. So I founded HRM in 1994. At the time, I was a mother of 3 young children under 4, and I was working as a college lecturer, and found in that network that I wasn't able to manage childcare. So sort of best thing for me to do was to set up my own business. That's at the time I thought would give me more flexibility and being able to manage my children, because I lived in a part of Scotland that I didn't have any family in either. So after 27 years, we now provide care services across 9 local authority areas to older people, children and families, and people with disabilities. 27 years later, we now are nearing the 300 staff, and we support over 800 service users. I've always been highly motivated, and I've always enjoyed academic studies as well. So I've spent a lot of years becoming very knowledgeable about my sector, because I started off life as a medical scientist. I didn't work in social work or social care. So I've returned to university several times, and I've got a master's in social work, master's in dementia studies, and various other qualifications that have helped me manage my presence in the social care work and area, really. And because I qualified as a medical scientist in 1986, I had an acute understanding of the risks and actions that I felt were needed to cope with the COVID pandemic. That scientific background really gave me, I think, an upper hand in understanding what measures I had to take in my business to try and protect my business as quickly as possible. So during this time over the last year, I've had the ability to contribute to a lot of work through Scottish Care and the Scottish Government. I've participated in steering groups with the Digital Health Institute. I worked on the COVID clinical assessment tool. I was involved in the National Infection Control Guidance for care at home, and I've been involved in several adult social care reform work streams, because this is an industry that requires to be reformed and is structurally unsound at this present time. I've also been involved in steering groups with the Digital Health Institute now to design support tools for care at home, so that they can measure, for instance, people's levels of nutrition within their own home. They can start to do predictive analysis on people having falls in their own home. So all that work's really, really exciting, and it's leading to the development of different types of care services. And I've been involved today, again, on the Fair Work Committee to look at fair work practices in the sector. And through this, the work that we've done over the last year, we've been very proactive in leadership. My team and myself have delivered over 1,800 care visits per day. we've had 13 service users suspected of having COVID that tested negative. We only had 3 people out of hundreds of people confirmed with COVID on admission to hospital. We've had no deaths in our service due to COVID, and none of our staff had contracted COVID in that period. And throughout this period, we have continued to recruit. So we've recruited at least 80 new care workers in that period. That hasn't been easy, but we were very committed to doing that in order to continue to deliver our services. So we had to adapt quite significantly to survive. And the first sort of thing we looked at was the emotional impact right from the outset on a workforce that were going to be in the front line and had to continue. And we had a lot to contend with because we had a lot of workers who were very nervous about continuing to work while there was a COVID pandemic on. So we had to be very clear and consistent with our messaging to staff. We had to be positive, calm, and present lots of uplifting messaging and communication at all times. And it's not been an easy journey. I naturally am quite a calm individual, so we tend to have that kind of aura within our culture. And on top of that, we've spent a lot of time communicating with staff to address all their fears around continuing to work. And it's been a very challenging period of time, but largely we haven't lost too many staff as a result of the COVID pandemic. But we had to take a lot of practical steps, and those steps were about extending our office hours so that we opened 7 days a week. We didn't open 7 days a week prior to the pandemic. Our offices were only open 5 days a week. We had to invest significantly in PPE, and at the outset that was a very challenging piece of work because there was a very strong shortage of supply. We had to risk analyse all our service users and categorise them for local authorities as red, amber, green. We had to report the administrative burden that's been placed on care services like ours has been enormous. We've had to report consistently, daily, for weeks on end, and it hasn't yet came to an end. So our team have worked really hard to maintain services to vulnerable people and to maintain business income levels. And that was really challenging because a lot of local authorities, for instance, just withdrew services immediately because their staff were working from home, or they cut people's care services. So we weren't in a position to do that because our infrastructure requires us to be able to maintain our income levels because we've got a massive payroll. We're paying out millions of pounds every year. So we had to work really, really hard to sustain our current existing business and try and grow the business further. And part of trying to manage that was about trying to let staff know that they were safe to work and that we were ensuring that they would be as safe as possible to continue their work. So lots of things were introduced. You know, the office isn't open to the general public. Visitors need to make prior appointments. We've got social distance signage everywhere, as all other businesses do. But we also introduced temperature checking right from the outset. I've had teams checking everyone's temperature twice a day. You know, we take QR codes to capture, test and protect details. We socially distance within our office environment. We still, if I get up from my desk, I've got to put a mask on as I walk across my office. So we're very, very conscious of the social distancing and taking these measures to protect ourselves. Now, we're all in a fortunate position now where we've all had vaccines, but we are still maintaining these practices in order to ensure that staff feel safe in this environment to continue working. Most of our office-based staff didn't want to work from home. They went to work from home, but found that by the nature of the work we do, we have to collaborate quite closely with each other, particularly when we're rostering care services, you know, because there's a bit of sort of horse trading goes on with workers and areas that we cover, and they couldn't do that effectively from home. Now we have freestanding temperature screens on our office premises. We've got we've actually brought in air purification systems. We've had our offices sanitised. If there's been any risk to anybody, we've sanitised each of these office environments. And for staff who are working out in the front line, we've actually increased the number of uniforms that they had, increased the number of PPE supplies, introduced other activities around car sharing. You know, there's rules around where they sit in the car, what they wear when they're in the car. And we've constantly reinforced the PPE guidelines every other week to staff. And we've very proactively managed all of that, because that's the only way we can protect the people that we look after and the staff that we have. So we've been very, very much active in doing all of that. So we've proactively managed the vaccination programme too. The first round of vaccinations was for the flu vaccine, and we've managed to secure over 90% of our workforce with flu vaccines. And the COVID vaccines, we've managed to achieve a 95% rate with that, with only very small numbers of people not wanting to get the vaccine, perhaps people that are expecting or have got other health conditions. And we're now having to proactively manage the PCR weekly testing programme. And when I say proactive, a lot of this system's been set up so that the worker themselves is responsible for their testing, or they're responsible for booking their vaccines. We've actually taken that administrative burden away from them, and we've tried to support them to ensure that we are getting the numbers of people through these processes, because it's very important to the people that we're looking after, and it's very important to our staff that we try and do that. But what else changed during this COVID? Well, we had to change a lot of our working practices. So really wanted to harness the benefits of new technologies to support the kind of frontline delivery of services. And we had started that journey before the COVID pandemic, but it really accelerated at pace, because there were things that we did as a service that we weren't able to regularly do or routinely do for some people, because a lot of people were quite fearful of someone coming into their house. And in order to minimise that, we moved quickly to adopt, for instance, the Near Me video conferencing software that the NHS use for GP surgeries or for hospital appointments. So we're now licensed by the NHS to use that software, so we can do our care reviews remotely. We can do our care planning with families remotely. We've introduced other digital care apps so that everything is becoming digitalised. There's less paper, there's less room for cross-contamination, there's less handling of things in people's homes. And that has really improved the confidence of the staff and the people that we're looking after. They can see that people are wearing PPE equipment at every single visit, and that it's changed at each visit. So you can imagine we have piles and piles of PPE equipment being delivered to our offices every week for distribution into the community. And one of the other systems we introduced was a Sage People, a global HR and people management system, because that helps us to onboard staff to our organisation. It helps us to manage and retain our workforce, and it's effectively digitalising our HR and people management processes. And that's been really important too, because staff have at their fingertips using an app access to their really employment records. And all of these systems are improving the efficiency at which we deliver care services and the efficient ways that we organise our workforce. So I was asked to talk about how we coped with media coverage during this period, and to be honest, it's a very tricky situation for someone in my position in a sector that's so highly publicised and highly regulated. And you'll probably have seen there's been lots and lots of press coverage during this time, and not always particularly positive press coverage of the care sector generally. So I had to take a very careful stance. It was quite easy to get caught up in all of that. You know, Twitter and all these LinkedIn and all these social media platforms make it very easy to say things, but you have to be quite thoughtful and careful, I think, when you're running a care organisation like I am. So I read all of this stuff that's out there, but I'm very careful and considered about what I would comment on. I now use a media agency to manage any difficult or contentious issues, and I always run it past them first because they are very politically aware, so they can guide me on the best way to maybe tackle that approach that I've had from a journalist, the approach that I've maybe had from a newspaper. I've tried all year to contribute to positive and uplifting news and stories, and we've worked really hard. We've got a communications team and a new marketing manager, and we've tried really hard to make sure that we're sharing positive and uplifting stories, and that's for the benefit of our staff too and the people that we're looking after, because we need positive news stories just now. It's quite a difficult environment for everyone, and their mental health can suffer in a period like this. So for us, it's been really important that we celebrate the successes or the small wins. And for instance, in the run up to Christmas, we did a 4 p.m. Christmas song. Every day we sang Christmas songs at 4 o'clock. Everybody down tools on their desks, we all joined in singing the song of the day, and you have no idea how uplifting that was and how that made us all feel much better, because we've been so stressed in delivering these services because the pressure has been enormous at all, for months and months on end. So really it's about remaining calm when provoked, and we've been provoked a lot over the last year, and choosing wisely when to comment or enter a debate, and that has only come with experience. I've encountered several really bad experience. I've had several really bad experiences with the media over the last 26 years, and I've learned to reflect before I act ever. And using that time wisely is something that we've put a lot of thought this year into how we can seek to inform, influence and contribute. And fortunately, now that health and social care is at the forefront of the public's mind, it's allowing things hopefully to change in the sector that's been crying out for the last 20 years to have change. So really that's how I have coped when I'm approached by the media. Now they're asking me to write articles on technological change, or articles, or give them positive news stories, because they themselves are looking for more uplifting content. And that's really where I've chosen to spend my time, rather than getting involved in all the negative debates that are there. So there have been challenges in keeping staff motivated, and a lot of that's to do with burnout. A lot of it was to do with fear and anxiety, and there was a lot of fear and anxiety amongst the workforce. I don't think it's okay to say that that everyone that was doing that job was happy to continue doing it. There was a lot of anxiety around, and a lot of stress and work pressures. The demands that have been placed on us by government and by local authorities has been quite overwhelming on some occasions. And we just took the view that we would overcome it by recognising them, but we would just take them one problem at a time, and that we would try to address the real concerns that people have, because we don't all have the same personality makeup, and one person's stress might be someone else might not be bothered about at all. But really it's about trying to tackle that, because at the end of the day, what we needed to do was to keep the show on the road and keep the services functioning. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that people are happy to come to work and they're happy to deliver care. So for us, we've got to work really hard at that, because it's been really easy for people to say, I can't come to work today, or I need to shield, or I need to self-isolate. So trying to deal with that with a large workforce has been quite challenging. And so then anything that we can do to make people feel better each day, whether it's, today we've had McDonald's in the office today, in the office that I'm sitting in today. So every day people are trying to do different things that just lifts people's spirits for a day. And that's really how we are choosing to get through all of this. So I was asked, how do I motivate myself? Well, it's very helpful that I'm a positive, solution-orientated individual. I've got a can-do attitude to life. I've found this sector very challenging over the last 27 years. I've had to learn a lot of very hard lessons, but I'm very focused on survival. When you've got nearly 6 million turnover and you've got over 300 people to pay every week, you get very focused on how do you get the money in to be able to pay that wage bill every week. I've learned that I'm extremely resilient, and I also see there's lots of opportunity. This is the fastest growing sector in the world. So, I think that this sector will contribute to Scotland's economy in the future in a massive way, and it hasn't yet been recognised by our government. So I'm really excited about that prospect. And having come through COVID, what I have learned is that actually my business was actually fairly well set up to tackle something like this. And I think that's down to the hard work that we've all put in over the last 5 years, not just over the last year. And sort of finally, we've kept hope alive because social care is now in the headlines, and the whole team can see that they're now valued by society in a different way than they were, and that recognition has swelled their confidence, their self-esteem and pride in their job roles. And I think it's gave them a greater sense of purpose too. And we've kept hope alive by talking to our team, holding their hands along the way, and they've held ours, because this is a people business. And despite the technology guys that are coming into the industry that think it's all about technology and building Uber type care platforms, I believe it's about relationships and it's about the people. And if we care for the people and care for our workforce in the same way as the people we look after, then we will get through these situations. And that's really the sort of culture that I'm trying to create within my organisation. There is no point in delivering care to people if we don't care about the people who are delivering that care. And, this year itself really highlighted the importance of that and the value that we've placed on people. And I think we've done a grand job, because our business is growing. We haven't lost business. We've worked really hard to maintain it, and we're just growing every single day. And I think that itself says a lot about our organisation and the people who work here. And that's really all I can say about our experience during COVID.
Great, thanks very much, Lynn. I'm just going to pause the recording.
Hi everybody, and thanks very much for inviting me along this evening. Really well done, Lynn. I'm so struck by your positive messages and the care that you've got for your team. I just think that's fantastic. And a lot of what you said, there are a lot of parallels with the way we've dealt with the pandemic in our teams. And I had a slight wry smile when you talked about keeping the show on the road, because of course that's something that we just haven't been able to do, well, for some of the time. So I'm going to start, if I might, by just saying, well, I'm Director of Planning at Scottish Opera, and tell you a little bit about one of the aims of the company, just to provide some context. Some of you, of course, may have already been to a performance in one of our bigger theatres in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen or Inverness, or you might have been to a small venue and seen a really tiny show in a local space. But providing you with a little bit of context, one of our key objectives is to create opera of the highest standard, performed in theatres, community schools and other venues across Scotland, reaching the broadest population base across all 32 local authorities. So as the pandemic grew this time last year and the company closed its doors, we, along with the rest of the performing arts industry, had to face the realisation that live performance, as we aim to provide, was not going to be possible. We had to consider, in the face of this uncertainty, how we could continue to create and present our work for audiences and how we could support our workforce. So initially we reacted, I think, in the same way as much as everybody else. We began home working. We connected over Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and I think most of us joined up informally over things like WhatsApp. We set up regular team meetings, senior team meetings, to discuss the situation. Within our respective departments in the company, we set up regular slots to catch up and keep in touch with each other. We were fortunate, actually, as a touring company, that many of us were used to working away from the office anyway. The team has worked together for many years, a lot of the senior team for as many as 15 years. So the transition to working away from the office wasn't quite perhaps as much of a stretch as it might have been for many. Some of our company actually also started to help others immediately. The props and wardrobe team started making gowns and PPE equipment for the NHS. But also looking beyond the company, it became more important it is even more important to lean on our established industry networks and finding out how everybody else is dealing with things and sharing challenges. We've all benefited, I think, from transparent and honest conversations and the trust that we've built up in the period. As we started to look beyond the immediate fallout, it was vital that we could continue to connect with audiences. Our thoughts turned to what might be possible, and ideas began to develop quickly. Throughout the period, but especially at the beginning, we had to consider immediate postponement or cancellation of productions. A lot of this work has been scheduled for many months and sometimes several years ahead of time. So we began to form a list of new ideas and projects to replace the live performances and, of course, the bigger productions that really weren't going to be possible in the short term. We're a company rich in resources. We have talented performers. We have 4 emerging artists, singers, the Orchestra of Scottish Opera, our network of freelance choristers, artists, creative teams, and our own in-house staff director, and of course, music director. We have technical, making, administration, marketing, finance, fundraising teams, many, many people. And we also have buildings in which we have studio rehearsal spaces and performance spaces. So we can be flexible, and the company framework, having developed in recent years, can flex according to activity and need and expand and contract as required. However, we realised that in order to produce any work within the evolving restrictions, there were significant challenges to overcome. For example, how could we now bring large groups of people together safely in our buildings? Was it safe for musicians to work close to each other? Some of you might have seen in the press about the fact that they thought the virus had been transmitted at choral and choir events and sessions and concerts. And some of the chat too has been about wind and brass instruments and the transmission of the virus that way. So we weren't sure how that was going to evolve. We also had to consider how we could create work. I don't know if many of you know much about opera, but a lot of the stories that are told are full of moments of close contact between performers. Sometimes we have large crowd scenes with many, many chorus and singers in the same space on stage. And sometimes it's about the intimacy of a moment between 2 singers. So we all had to adapt, remain flexible, agile, and collaborate in new and different ways. Some of the steps we took to realise these projects that we were coming up with included considering works with smaller performing forces, fewer singers, instrumentalists, and maybe no chorus, none of those big crowd scenes. We also thought about performing outside. We also explored ways to create film. Of course, those were without audience. Eventually, when we were able to start bringing people back together again to work, a huge amount of care and consideration had to go into creating a safe environment. This has been of paramount importance from the very beginning. Some of the practical steps we took included expanding our risk assessment procedures for all projects to take account of COVID. We, of course, also wear masks and PPE as well. Perhaps if that is, some of the team have had to wear full PPE if they've been dressing people in costumes, for example. Social distancing strictly observed, not just as we walk around our buildings, but when we're working in any given space. We've set up one-way systems in our buildings, pathways around all our premises. We coordinated arrival times, scheduling when people should turn up at buildings. We did the same temperature checks that Lynn talked about. In fact, all of this is continuing, of course, as things are not really changing significantly. We also consider airflow and circulation in the venues that we were working in and continue to work in. And we thought about providing extended breaks to give people time to go and get fresh air in between rehearsals. Also mask breaks, because when you're singing and you're wearing a mask, it's incredibly off-putting and uncomfortable. So lots of practical steps that we could take to help everybody in their work. More recently as well, we've been considering testing. It's becoming more widely available, and we're researching whether this could be of benefit as we start to look ahead to our upcoming work. So we've been proud of the successes achieved in the period and the challenges we've overcome and continue to work through. And I thought I'd like to tell you about 3 projects, 3 of the strands, and some of the new approaches to achieving this work. The first is our pop-up operas, presented by our education department in August to September. These are short pieces of about 50 minutes or so. I'm not sure if any of you perhaps managed to catch them when we toured them in the early autumn. They're specially reduced versions of popular and newly created operas for only a handful of performers, 2 singers, 2 instrumentalists, and a narrator. We adapted a curtain-sided trailer to form a covered stage for the small group of performers. This truck then toured to outdoor sites and car parks across Scotland, attracting small audiences, socially distanced audiences, all the way across, and it was very popular. I asked Jane Davidson, our Director of Education and Outreach, if you could pick one thing that you were proud of overcoming to enable these shows to be performed to our audiences live, what would it have been and why? And she said, I think our brand is a very trusted one in Scotland. And when we were able to put the tour into place and advertise it coming, I think most people felt confident that everything would be done properly to ensure everyone's safety. That point of view was certainly reflected in the audience feedback. Quality was assured, not just artistic, but also in terms of pastoral care. She also said, and working within the rules so that we could bring some much needed quality musical entertainment to people. Now, I haven't been so successful with my technology, so I have a very lo-fi way of sharing images with you. I'm afraid it's a printout of a photograph, but I'm hoping that you'll get the sense of our little pop-up endeavour from this photograph. So the truck is along the back here, and the audience were placed in simple hoops on the ground, just thrown on the ground, but obviously socially distanced. Really, really simple way of organising the audience, but really effective. The next project that I wanted to talk to you about was our outdoor production of LabOM. Just saw the comment there, thank you. So this was presented in the car park of our production studios in Glasgow, just up at Eddington Street, just along the back of the canal. And all the performers and the audiences were spaced 2 meters apart at all times. The venue we used, because of course we're outside, but we did actually construct a tent-like structure. It was a transparent roofed tent structure without walls. And that afforded everybody the very safest space possible to experience this work. So I have another photo to show you, similar, I'm afraid, here. I think this is actually quite a good one, and it really does give you a sense of the space. If the eagle-eyed amongst you spot the back of my head, it's a gold star. But you can see that the tent-shaped structure allowed the light to come in. There's plenty of space. It covered everybody over and it protected them from the weather, but of course not the wind. But that's another story. So this particular production required everybody to be flexible in their approach. It was quite new way of working for everyone in the company. And some of the considerations we had to think about were performing the piece in a reduced version. I don't know how many of you know LabOM, but it is a full main stage opera with cast, chorus, full orchestra. This reduced version had no chorus and fewer orchestral players than we would normally expect to tour in our bigger theatres. We made some cuts in the music to allow the piece to be performed without an interval, lasting for about an hour and a half, which we felt was about the maximum we could expect people to sit in one place, outside. We placed the orchestra inside the building that you saw at the back of the tent. So right at the back here is our production studio building, and the orchestra were inside there. But the cast, of course, were outside on 3 separate performing areas. So this meant that as everybody moved around, we had to balance the sound, and we amplified everybody. That's something that we wouldn't ordinarily do. I'm not sure if you know that, but when we have singers in the theatre, we wouldn't put microphones on them. It's all their natural voices. But of course, practically speaking, outside, that's just not practical or possible, and nobody would hear anything. Another thing we did for both our LabOM production and our pop-up show was to sell tickets online. We no longer issue paper tickets. And when they arrived in the space, everybody was directed through a specific route to their socially distanced seats. And for LabOM, they were placed in heart-shaped markings on the ground. And of course, with no interval, everybody had to stay in those positions for the whole show. The show was directed by Scottish Opera's staff director, Roxana Haynes, and Roxana had to overcome some considerable challenges to present the piece. This is a story about love that so many people know inside out and had to be told with nobody touching each other. So I asked Roxana the same question I'd asked Jane, and she said, I think for me, the most difficult thing to overcome was working out how to tell the story safely. Not only telling a love story with no proximity, physical contact or prop sharing, but also how the audience still feel part of the action and connected. Mostly the things that look most simple have required sleepless nights. I can vouch for the success of our storytelling. Some audience members were moved to tears. As well as our outdoor live performances, we started to dip our toes in the world of film. You may have seen yourselves the initial explosion of online content being created in the homes of singers and musicians. We too posted content created by our emerging artists and our regular chorus members, but we also started to look at ways of developing what we could offer for our online audience. Relatively early in the pandemic, we released our first opera made for film called The Narcissistic Fish. This was a work we'd been working on before the pandemic, which was groundbreaking, both in terms of us creating a new opera specifically for film, but also as part of steps towards making more of our work available online. Fever, our education department's aptly named program of activity for children, was also released online in a period where our specialist teams would ordinarily be working in primary schools around Scotland. Both of these initiatives were really successful and reached several thousand people internationally. So continuing in this vein, the third strand of work I think demonstrates our adaptability were our filmed performances. Working in this way continued to stretch and develop our creative thinking. The first was a successful collaboration with the Edinburgh International Festival to create a film of the telephone filmed at the King's Theatre in Edinburgh. For this project, we recorded the audio first with the orchestra and soloists in separate spaces, separate rooms in our production studios. It wasn't impossible, but it would not normally be the way we would create work with everybody coming together. For the next 3 films, we were fortunate to be able to bring everybody together to film in the Theatre Royal. With social distancing always required, it was very important to maintain space in the venue and on stage at all times. My final photograph is not great. It was taken during Hansel and Gretel, and I hope it gives you an idea of the sort of layout of the space on stage that we had in the Theatre Royal. What I would also like to do is point you all towards our website, because the film of Hansel and Gretel and several other of our works is still available online. So if you get the chance and you're interested, please do go and have a look. It's www.scottishopera.org.uk. So yes, returning to Hansel and Gretel, you will see that the orchestra are placed at the back of the stage here. I mean, it's very, very blurry, and I appreciate it's a rubbish image. But also at the front of the stage, we have the singers on what is a diamond-shaped grid. What I was going to tell you about this particular type of work is that normally you would expect the orchestra to be under the stage in the pit in all the theatres. However, with poor air circulation in what is effectively the basement, the air wouldn't circulate freely enough and therefore wouldn't be safe for the players. So, but even with the space on stage, it was much more spacious and we could spread everybody out. Social distancing was fine, but we still wanted to use several plastic screens within the orchestra layout to protect the players and to keep the conductor safe as well. So yeah, so I think that gives you a good example of some of our work. And as I say, please do go to the website and have a look, keep you entertained with a glass of wine in these evenings. So just going on to say a little bit more about what other things we've done. We've explored new ways of promoting and presenting our work. We've collaborated, for example, with BBC Radio Scotland to feature audio excerpts from the film of Hansel and Gretel on Classics Unwrapped as a precursor to the online launch of the film itself. And we still continue to explore new ways of working. This week, we held a workshop for a small group of choristers in preparation for a future production. The director joined us from Brazil via Zoom, and several others from the team involved listened in from other parts of the UK. I think it goes without saying that this would simply not have occurred to us to try a year ago, but now it feels like an obvious option where in-person working is not possible. So now I wanted to turn to the way we have supported the company in the period, because the workforce is also integral to the success of survival, or success and the survival of the company. It was very important to the company to support everybody through this from the outset and ensure that everybody kept safe at all times. We continued to pay everybody in the period and make use of the UK government's furlough scheme where possible. We're thankful for the continued funding from the Scottish Government and some generous donations that we've received from supporters along the way, all of which has enabled us to continue to provide work for so many. Within the company, Alex Radick, our General Director, has been sending out regular communications and updates to keep connected to company members. But we've also been mindful of keeping up communication with everybody, not just internally, but supporting our freelance community. Over the course of any year, hundreds of artists, creative teams, artisans and technical staff will work with us alongside our core working team. Excuse me. We supported the online Light It in Red campaign, which was initiated to draw attention to the plight of the performing arts and the need of support of this industry. Companies throughout the UK lit their buildings and theatres in red, and this has been promoted again this week. We've featured it once again on our social media channels. We also kept in touch with patrons, making calls to those we knew were on their own and sending them email updates. We've even held supporter events over tried and tested Zoom. Some of these have also been live streamed events. And of course, we've continued to be visible on social media, posting regular updates and conversations. Throughout, the company has shown compassion and support to employees, particularly those who have caring responsibilities and the dreaded homeschooling to deal with. It was important to keep everyone feel connected to the company and valued in their roles, even while work is not possible for many. Thankfully, we've always had the goal of the next project to work towards too. Projects like the Outdoor Bohem have provided a real morale boost and sense of purpose. And now there is a real sense of forward momentum once again as the country starts to move out of lockdown. It's been important to me too to keep connected to members of my team and to promote a sense of hope throughout. We've done small things along the way. We've shared all the individual bits and bobs of our daily lives. We've encouraged each other with recommendations of films and TV, photos of our gardening work, all sorts of things, whatever really, anything that we could share just to keep connected. And another thing that we did, which was quite amusing, was to create a video or a photo montage for everyone's birthday. Mine was the team each assuming a letter of happy birthday with their own body. So they made the shape out of their own body. I decided I wouldn't share that with you this evening. I don't think they'd thank me for it. So in conclusion, I think if I had to sum up how the company survived in the past year, I would say it's been a combination of always being open to new ideas and collaborations and willing and determined to explore how to bring new ideas to fruition, even where there are significant challenges ahead. Being clear, open and honest in communications at all levels, and keeping in regular contact with colleagues and stakeholders. And finally, having compassion and understanding for everyone's individual situation. And to close, I'll leave you with a quote from Alex Radick, our General Director, who was also asked the same question about what he is most proud of the company achieving in the period. And he said, he's proud that the company is fleet of foot, and that we could quickly reimagine what we could offer our audiences, and that we're all still here. And I think that sums it up well to finish there. Thank you very much.